All right, let's just dive right in. We are talking about one of the most mysterious, most debated, and honestly most influential books ever written, the Book of Daniel. For thousands of years, it's captivated everyone from kings to scholars, and today we're going to try and figure out why.
So here's the big question, the puzzle at the heart of it all. How can you have one single book that seems to predict the rise and fall of massive empires with stunning accuracy? But at the same time, you have a whole school of thought that says, nope, it's a brilliant work of fiction written way after the fact. That's what we're here to unpack.
Right, but before we can even touch the wild prophecies and all the debates, we have to get to know the man at the center of the storm. Who exactly was Daniel?
I mean, just think about the sheer scope of this guy's life. It's kind of mind-blowing. He wasn't some prophet hiding out in a cave. This was a top-tier statesman. Dragged off to Babylon as a teenager, he ends up serving through the entire 70-year exile. He advised kings in the Babylonian Empire and then in the Persian Empire that conquered it. And get this, he's still receiving these epic visions when he's almost 90 years old. It's just an incredible career.
You know, a really great way to get a handle on his role comes from this powerful parallel the source material makes. Daniel is like a second Joseph. And when you stop and think about it, it fits perfectly, right? Both were exiles. Both rose up through their wisdom to become second in command to a powerful foreign king. And both of them were absolutely crucial in making sure their people had a future in a land that wasn't their own.
Okay, so Daniel the man, a huge historical figure, no doubt. But it's his visions that really crank things up a notch, turning his story into this prophetic puzzle that people have been trying to solve for centuries.
And yeah, we're not talking about your garden variety predictions here. Daniel's prophecies are this whirlwind of strange symbolic imagery. We're talking about monstrous, multi-headed beasts crawling out of the sea, cosmic battles between a ram and a goat, and these really cryptic timelines that people have been debating and calculating for ages.
And the scope of these visions is just massive. They seem to lay out this whole succession of world empires, from Persia showing up on the scene to its defeat by Alexander the Great and the Greeks. And then you've got the super famous 70 weeks prophecy, which many are convinced is a direct countdown to the arrival of the Messiah. This is some seriously dense, complex material.
So you're probably thinking, how on earth does anyone even begin to make sense of all this? Well, over the centuries, people have come up with several different frameworks, or keys, you could say, to try and unlock Daniel's mysteries. We're going to walk through the 5 main ways people read this book.
So, think of this as our roadmap for the next few minutes. We're going to check out 5 totally different lenses people use to interpret Daniel, and trust me, each one leads to a radically different place. First up,
Okay, so back during the Protestant Reformation, you had guys like Martin Luther and John Calvin. They're reading Daniel's prophecies about this powerful corrupting force, this little horn, and they see their own world in it. For them, the villain wasn't some long-dead king. It was the papacy. The book basically became a prophetic instruction manual for their own time.
and this quote, man, it really gets to the heart of their worldview. It was just assumed that, of course, the main stage of human history was Europe. So, naturally, a big-time biblical prophecy had to be about what was happening in Europe. It's a classic case of reading your own world back into an ancient text.
Then, after events like the French Revolution, things started to shift. The focus moved away from a historical institution, like the papacy, and zoomed in on a single, terrifying figure who is still to come, the Antichrist. This view takes Daniel's prophecies and pushes their fulfillment way, way out into our future.
And that is the key move this entire approach makes. It literally inserts a massive time gap into the prophecy. It's like it jumps from the ancient Roman Empire, hits a 2,000-year pause button, and then picks right back up at the very end of the world.
All right, now let's take that futurist idea and crank it up to 11. That's the dispensational approach, and it got incredibly popular over the last century. It creates this super detailed, almost minute-by-minute roadmap of the end times, pulling in verses not just from Daniel, but from all over. This is where you get ideas about a rebuilt temple, a secret rapture, and a 7-year tribulation, all stuffed into that 2,000-year gap we just talked about.
Okay, complete 180-degree turn now. The skeptical view says, hold on, there's no prediction here at all. The idea is that the book was actually written much later, maybe around the 2nd century BC. The author just pretended to be Daniel. So the prophecies are really just history, written after it happened, to give hope to Jewish people who were suffering under this awful Greek king, Antiochus Epiphanes.
But the pushback on that is pretty straightforward and powerful. The book itself claims to be from Daniel, and for believers, this is a huge deal.
Jesus himself refers to Daniel the prophet, which seems to take the book's own claims at face value. This perspective says we should treat it as a real prophecy from the 6th century BC because that's what it says it is.
Okay, our fifth and final approach. This one kind of brings everything back home, back to Daniel's own world. Also called preterism, this view says forget the huge time gaps and the focus on Europe. It argues the prophecies were fulfilled in the history that happened right after Daniel. The story of Persia, Greece, and Rome, all leading up to the massive events of the 1st century AD. It keeps the prophecies firmly planted in their original context.
So let's just lay it all out. Look at how different the answers are. You've got the anti-papal view focused on the 1500s. The two futurist views jump thousands of years ahead to the very end of time. The skeptical view winds the clock back and says it was all written and done by the 2nd century BC. And the covenant historical view sees it all coming to a head in the 1st century AD. It really is like 5 different keys, opening 5 completely different doors.
The fact that we can even have 5 completely different major ways to read this one book, well, it just goes to show you what an enduring enigma this is. It's a puzzle that every new generation feels compelled to try and solve.
So why? Why all the division? Why is it so complicated? Well, it turns out that beyond those 5 frameworks, the book itself has at least 3 core challenges baked right into it.
First, there's the prophetic language itself. It's so symbolic. What are these beasts and horns supposed to be, literally? Second, you've got the chronology. Some of the dates, names of kings seem to clash with what we've found in other ancient records, which is a big puzzle. And third, there's the theology. Figuring out exactly how Daniel's message fits into the giant, overarching story of the Bible is a challenge in itself. These 3 things are what keep the debate raging.
And that kind of leaves us with one last big question. When you have a text like the book of Daniel, is its real power in finding that one single correct interpretation, or is its true lasting value found in the centuries of debate and the deep questions about history, God, and the future that it forces every single one of us to ask? You know, maybe the puzzle itself is the whole point.